Hey, Pam.
Hey, Renee. Our topic for this session is free speech, hate speech, and censorship. That seems like a lot to take on in a short amount of time, especially given the controversies swirling around these topics of late, particularly when we disagree. The Department of Homeland Security has recognized that this polarization can lead to hate and radicalization, which can then lead to violence. Our focus question for today is how are digital technologies influencing people's understanding of free speech, hate speech, and censorship? We're talking about the balance between freedom of expression and social responsibility.
So let's start by talking about the First Amendment. You probably know that that's also part of the Bill of Rights because it ensures that people have the right to assemble, the right to practice their religion, the right to express themselves freely, and the right to protest or petition the government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment, of course, also protects freedom of the press. But the First Amendment has limits. There's a lot of nuance involved, and it's easy to get confused. Disinformation is protected under the First Amendment, as well as hate speech. The people who wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights believed that the protection of unpopular speech was necessary in order for self-governance to work. Although false speech, lies, and hate speech may not add much value to the marketplace of ideas, there was concern that prohibiting these kinds of speech could chill more valuable speech, meaning that it would cause people to self-censor out of fear of violating the law. Now, there are some specific types of laws that do limit the content of speech, including perjury, defamation, and fraud. These are specific types of harmful speech that are punishable. Other federal laws address misrepresentation in political advertising or in broadcast media. So the First Amendment is not an unlimited right. Harassment, true threats, and defamation can all be prosecuted in cases where speech causes personal injury.
Yeah, perhaps you've attended a protest or a rally for something you care about. In doing so, you're exercising your First Amendment rights. But if you threaten someone at the protest, your speech can turn into harassment or threats. And now your freedom of expression can become a crime. What this means is that while each of us has the right to protest, our right to protest does not override anyone else's right to safety. Courageous Rhode Island's goal is to reduce the hate that leads to violence. So we think it's very important to understand the relationship between hate speech and hate crime. Hate crimes create widespread fear and anxiety for a whole group of people. Hate speech is any form of expression through which speakers intend to vilify, humiliate, or incite hatred against a group or a class of persons on the basis of race, religion, skin color, sexual identity, gender identity, ethnicity, disability, or national origin. While it can be reprehensible, hate speech is legal unless it's a true threat, incitement to imminent lawless action, discriminatory harassment, or defamation. Then it can be punished. There is an important legal spectrum which distinguishes hate speech, which is protected by the First Amendment, and hate incidents, which may or may not be criminal, and hate crimes, which can get people sent to jail. If you live in the US, you can report civil rights violations, hate incidents, police misconduct, or excessive use of force by filing a complaint online or by calling your state attorney general's office.
That is important to know. Now let's talk about deplatforming. These days, we've been hearing a lot about people who were kicked off of Facebook or kicked off of Twitter. Some of you have maybe even experienced this or know someone who has. Is deplatforming a form of censorship? Well, in 2018, there was a noticeable shift in the way social media companies were handling user-generated content. Facebook and Google wanted to stem the rise of online hate speech that was coming from bigots and conspiracy theorists and Nazis. So they removed users for violating their terms of service agreements that allow you to use the platform. You may remember when Alex Jones got kicked off YouTube. Remember that, Pam, in 2018? Yeah. Jones had repeatedly called the Sandy Hook massacre, in which 20 children were killed. He kept calling it a hoax. His followers had been harassing the family members of the children who were killed for years. So basically, social media companies decided in 2018 to do something about it. First, Apple removed his podcasts from iTunes. Then Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, MailChimp, Stitcher, and Pinterest also kicked him off. And Twitter and PayPal also eventually dropped Alex Jones. Alex Jones was deplatformed. Getting deplatformed means that the rule breaker can no longer use that platform to share their thoughts and feelings with the world. And the social media companies have a right to do that. So is deplatforming a form of censorship? No. Here's an important distinction between censorship and content moderation. When government does the suppressing of words, images, or ideas, that is censorship when the government does it. When private entities do it, it's called content moderation. And it's actually their First Amendment right to pick and choose what to put on their platform. On digital platforms, content moderation is protected by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. This law says that platforms cannot be sued for any user-generated content they display. And this is important to note that if you create or share harmful or illegal content on these platforms, you can be sued, but the platform companies like Facebook or Instagram or Google, they cannot be sued.
What?
Yeah.
If I make a false statement about someone and put it on Facebook and people see it and it damages that person's reputation, I can be sued for defamation, but not Facebook?
Yes, because you are the responsible person. You are the person who created that message. Facebook or Instagram's sharing of it, they have immunity from being sued. The supporters of Section 230 say that if this law didn't exist, then platform companies would be so scared they'd have to check every single sentence in order to avoid the risk of lawsuits. And basically, social media couldn't exist. So critics of Section 230, they say that this gives the platform companies too much protection, and it lets powerful companies ignore real harm that users experience.
Now let's talk about cancel culture. Back in 2021, the actress Gina Carano was making a film called The Mandalorian. It was part of the Star Wars franchise and being produced by Disney. She posted this on her Instagram. Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? Now, as a private company, Disney had every right to fire her. And as it turns out, she had a long history of making other anti-Semitic comments on her social media. And for you Rhode Islanders, there's a local connection. After she posted this anti-Semitic remark on her Instagram, Hasbro in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, canceled her toy action figure too.
Her toy action figure was canceled too. So how is cancel culture different from censorship? Cancel culture is an interesting term. It refers to this idea that individuals or groups can punish or criticize or shame people who use words, ideas, or images that are considered offensive or problematic or wrong or politically unacceptable. In a way, cancel culture has existed since humans were humans, right? But now cancel culture can be widely implemented by bots because computer programmers can program a bot to respond automatically to certain keywords or certain key phrases, and then basically criticize, shame, or punish people who use that word. So when people use shame or blame to influence how others are seen by the public, that's not censorship. It's a type of gossip, really. It's public gossip. As long as it's not false and as long as it doesn't damage reputation, it's legal. Now, it wasn't always called cancel culture, of course, but public shaming has been around for a long time. They did it in ancient Greece. It was called ostracism. And back in the 90s, Monica Lewinsky, do you remember, Pam? She was as good as canceled after her secret relationship with President Clinton was revealed and her career was ruined. Cancel culture takes many forms, including people who feel incredibly righteous in their beliefs and sometimes become toxic mudslingers. Remember how we talked about toxic mudslingers being people who try to humiliate and harass those who represent opposing viewpoints, all in the name of their cause? But for many people, cancel culture feels new and it feels like censorship. So when celebrities or public figures are criticized to the point of being shamed, canceled, or ostracized, this might feel like a personal attack. And although Fox News had every right to part ways with Tucker Carlson, you remember they fired him, to many of his followers, it felt like he was being silenced or censored.
But now let's apply our media literacy skills to consider this interesting meme. It looks like a Twitter conversation between comedian Ricky Gervais and someone named Simon Jenkins. It may even seem like Ricky was in our courageous conversation called Feelings and Facts, wouldn't it, Renee? When he writes, "The world began to crumble when feelings started overriding facts." The other guy responds, "So are you like a full-on right-winger now? Because you must know the kinds of people that this phrasing aligns you with." And Ricky responds, "I'm also vegetarian, you know, like Hitler." Okay, Renee, this is a complex text. Let's
Yeah.
analyze this meme. How do you interpret it? What's the point here? For me, the context is somewhat ambiguous, so I'm confused. What phrasing is Simon Jenkins referring to? The world begins to crumble, or the feelings and facts line?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I'm not sure. What I see is that whenever some people see a kernel of their echo chamber, they make assumptions, right? And so it's probably one of those two phrases, Pam, triggered this guy into either or, us versus them, black against white, that kind of thinking. And he was triggered into that us versus them thing. And that leaves no room for complexity. You're either with us or you're against us. And that's what he did. And Ricky Gervais, being a comedian, he decided to tackle that head on by kind of upping the ante, making the reference to Hitler.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for most professional comedians, anyone and anything is fair game for roasting. So it's weird that he's being labeled in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And that punchline, I'm also a vegetarian like Hitler, that is definitely a commentary on the kind of superficial forms of cancel culture that are just knee-jerk reactions to some kind of trigger. And it also makes me wonder, of course, I'm also curious, like, so what are his politics? And you don't really know with comedians, sometimes you don't really know. I think some of us are in situations where we don't want to be caught supporting people who are problematic.
Or
And
even laughing with them or at them.
Exactly. So let's see if we can use those critical questions of media literacy to analyze. We've kind of responded to this meme, but now how are we going to analyze this text?
Well, okay, let's jump in. Authorship. So the original post was on Twitter or X. I'm not sure if this was before or after its transition, but maybe the social media post was shared on Reddit. The
Mhm.
author name we see is Bobo Jenkins, which is interesting because the commenter is Simon Jenkins. Is this a relation or a coincidence? That makes the purpose a bit ambiguous as well. Is this for entertainment or persuasion?
It's a combination, I think, of entertainment and persuasion. And if I were to do a little research and dig around, I might find that Bobo Jenkins is Simon Jenkins. It's possible. We all have alter egos online, don't we?
Yeah.
So this is a meme that's remixed to look like a social media post, but notice the different typeface at the bottom. And that's what makes it look remixed from my point of view. And regarding like what lifestyles, values, and points of view are represented, now this depends on your familiarity with this comedian and his context. I see that this is a comedian making fun of the phenomenon of cancel culture itself, and maybe of the larger issue of identity politics.
Yeah, humor is always a great way to get attention and to get people thinking. But there's also that shocking last line. People have different reactions when anything is compared to Hitler.
Right.
As for what's omitted, I'm still not clear if this is a real interaction. And if it is, what might the other comments on that post be saying?
That's great. Now that's a great way to handle that question. What is omitted, right? We could imagine maybe this is just a part of his shtick. Maybe this is just a joke, but maybe it is part of a real conversation, and we could kind of imagine how that might go. All right, now it's your turn, audience. We want you to discuss some of these issues we've explored: a hate speech, free speech, content moderation, cancel culture, and censorship. Here are some questions to help guide your discussion. Number one, how have you experienced the benefits of the First Amendment freedoms? And how have you experienced the drawbacks, limitations, or even the harms of First Amendment freedoms? Finally, we'd like you to explore this question: how should harmful forms of digital expression be regulated? By people themselves, working in a coordinated way? By government? By digital platforms?
Remember to follow the guidelines and have a great conversation.
Thanks for being courageous with us. Bye now.